Hi there, TCC. Welcome to the video series for writing, reading, and research and transferable skills across the disciplines. My name is Yasmin Shahal, and I teach in the Writing Studies program. I'm joined today by our lead tutor, Lindsay, from the Writing Center, and today we're interviewing Dr. Ramos from Communications. So our first question for you is, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you teach? What is your favorite course to teach? And what is one fun fact about you? And I'll put these questions in the chat as we go.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I think this is an amazing opportunity to be able to connect with students over video because we know the world is moving online and everything is out on the space. So here we are, right, trying to reach all kinds of audiences and where they're at. So my name is Tomas Ramos. I teach in the communications department. My favorite class to teach, and really, there's something unique about each one of them, and I love them all equally. I would say, in terms of one class that has made a difference in my life is public speaking, because it's a class that oftentimes we fear. We all have heard how Americans are more afraid of public speaking more than death itself. And that's not a good thing, right? That is absolutely not a good thing and not a good way to do it or to view it. And so I have a different approach in the way that I often like to say that I like to live my life as if it was the first day of my life. You know, sometimes people say, I like to live my life as if it was my last day on earth. I like to have a different outlook, and I like to approach the class that way, where it's a unique opportunity for students to discover how great they can be in public speaking. And anything and everything we do in life, when we're looking for a job, there isn't another class that is more, you know, when you're trying to get in the door, public speaking, you know, those first few minutes, those first few seconds where you can make an impact and a difference, and it's invaluable. So that's one, and the other one is multicultural communications. There's just so much that you can learn about how the world works. I'm originally from Mexico. I came to Tacoma to teach here at the college in 2007, and I uh, I went to the University of Texas Pan American, and I was an athlete in college, and I was fortunate to get a scholarship for athletics, and I was able to get through the majority of my schooling, and I was very lucky and also a blessing that I was able to support myself through the sport in track and field. So, you know, I live in Tacoma. My wife and my daughter. I live in Edgewood, which is right one of the suburbs of Tacoma. We love to go camping, and we love to go paddleboarding, and we like to travel. So it's those are our favorite activities, and we love living in the Northwest. If you think about it, how when the rest of the world is needing water, we got plenty of water. You gotta look at life in a way that is positive, right? It does rain a little bit too long, but hey, we get plenty of water, which people are struggling for around the world.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate learning about, your athletics background. I teach in the athletics learning community, and that idea what you said, like communication, you're going to need it everywhere. So athletes, I will say they're big communicators, and I love seeing that. So, all right. So our next question is, for students taking a class in your discipline, what would you like them to know about writing, reading, and research in your field? And does writing and reading and research play a role in your teaching?
So it is essential that that students come in with an open mind about what the communications field is about, because we're so diverse in communications. When you sign up for public speaking, is when you do a presentation or a speech, it's like writing an essay. It's like doing research for an essay, but you're presenting that verbally, orally, and so your ability to do research comes into place. And so then it's not that we have expectations for the students to come in knowing that they're supposed to know how to do research, but it's one of the steps that they're going to learn more about. There is a so students, it will be best if the students knew how to do some basics of research, and also knowing that a lot of reading is required. And what I mean by saying reading, not that you need to be an avid reader, that's not it, but the idea that you have to come in with an open mind, knowing that you have to read a lot to to be able to navigate the class easily. And granted that the readings may be fun readings, right? We're not talking about doing extreme research, but still, the ability to read and and then uh, and then just those basic skills with writing as well. But we meet students where they're at. I want to be perfectly clear that that we ask for the students to keep an open mind. I think we should ask that of ourselves as well, and we do, and we do. We like to we get running start students. We get students that are coming back from they have taken time off for a while. We have students that are mid-career and are looking for new skills. So yeah, some basic reading and writing skills are useful.
Thank you. I really like the idea of just having an open mind, really encouraging that space for students to really explore and may that be their voice. And it's a new skill that they're learning. So thank you. All right. So our next question is, what does effective writing, research, and comprehension look like in your field?
So because we have so many different areas in communications, like multicultural communications, interpersonal, business communication, and public speaking, they all require different levels of um, proficiency. And when you come into and we even have the communications 101, right, which is the basics of communication skills. So we based on the class, if you're taking, for example, um, multicultural communications, you're gonna have to do research in in other cultures, right? Learning about other cultures. So you do have to have, or we want you to have a well-rounded education to to become more of an intellectual, right? And not an elite um, academic scholar per se, but to have enough of those understandings of why the world works the way that it does, and then if you're taking public speaking, it's more about being able to write down what you want to say and then being able to translate that, because we have all seen in the political arena right now that statements are made on paper and they come across one way and they're interpreted and analyzed one way. But then when someone delivers that, we're seeing that in the country right now. When somebody actually delivers the presentation, it can come across in a very different way. So those are all skills that we learn about in the communications department.
Thank you. I like this idea that, like, when it comes to any situation, their ability to really transform. And like you said, like you might write that on paper, but it's all about your tone and the message itself it can go the way you want it or the way that you totally did not want. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is try to teach the students to learn how to manage their way of delivering messages, right? And still being yourself without losing your personality and your innate characteristics. One of the things that I often talk about is my biggest challenge in college was thinking that my accent gets on the way when I speak. And for so many years, I looked down upon myself,
Mhm.
thinking that other people were looking down at me for that. because when you come from another country or when you are a member of a minority group and your English is not as effective or efficient, we tend to do that to ourselves. But then I came to realize that having an accent is a plus, it's not a minus. People love other people with accents. It's almost like a superpower.
Yeah. I really appreciate you saying that. And it's such a powerful thing when students understand that English in itself, there's so many dialects of it. And it's like, their ways of speaking is as beautiful as whatever we say the traditional way of speaking is. And, like you said, it is a superpower. People do love those, I love an accent. And I think especially when they see like a professor in that role have an accent and just be authentically 100% themselves, that gives them permission. So I appreciate that. Also being bilingual and it's one of those things that you do think about and students are very harsh about themselves. So thanks so much for saying
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Before we move on to the next question, I think something that students need to remember and that I learned the hard way is that we're always far more critical of ourselves than
that.
other people are of us.
100%. All right. The next question is actually coming from Lindsay.
Yes, and this one is about tutors. Part of the thing that one of our objectives here is to kind of give some guidance for tutors. What do you recommend to students that are struggling to understand reading, writing, and research in your field? Is there anything specific you want our tutors to know about your courses? And what can tutors do to empower and help students feel confident navigating your courses?
Yeah, so let's go with the first one, right? What do we wish that students ask me the first question again, please.
Yeah, sure. What do you recommend to students that are struggling to understand writing, reading, and research in your field?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's not only on in our field, but I think it's there's something that is unique about writing and doing research that getting started on anything is the most difficult thing to do because we're often lost and we can brainstorm and have all these ideas and it can become overwhelming instantly, right? And it's great to brainstorm, but I think if we give ourselves a, a little bit of permission, a little bit of grace, with the understanding that the most difficult part of writing and doing research is getting started. And so when students sign up for class, any class really, it's okay to not to not be absolutely on the game, on the ball all the time, 100%. However, with that said, it is important to know that is that you do have to get started, right? And that you do have to put things down. So putting things down is really difficult. In fact, just like we were saying that we're often more critical of ourselves than others, it is the hardest thing to write about you. Then you can write about anybody else, right? And you can do research about anything, and we can easily do that. But when it comes to writing about ourselves, like when you're writing a resume, which is part of one of our classes in communications, if you're taking business and professional communications, writing a resume or a cover letter or an application to transfer to another college or coming into a college or writing for a scholarship is very difficult to write about ourselves. And one trick that I often talk to students about is because sometimes we want to be we don't feel comfortable saying all these things about ourselves, right? We don't want to come across as obnoxious or because that's what we think if we're boasting about it, right? So one thing I tell the students that they can often do is write about what a professor has said about you before, right? If you had a professor that you connected with and the professor said, you're a great writer, or you really get physics, or you really get chemistry, or this project was amazing, or you're really good at something, then you didn't say it. Somebody else has said it about you. So put that down, right? And it's an easy way not easy, but it's easier than having to write about yourself. So that's one thing that I know students struggle with, getting started on the projects and thinking about it too much to where we want it to be perfect and we don't make progress. Right? Yeah. And there was a second part to the question.
Yes. Is there anything specific you want our tutors to know about your courses?
You know, in the communications area is it's a unique area because it's not a hard science, it's not physics or chemistry and so then we look at many different aspects of humanity and the reasons why we do the things that we do, so that sometimes when we give out writing assignments, we're not sometimes we're not the most disciplined when it comes to writing directions for students, and I know I'm always keeping that in mind, right? And I have learned that over the years, but I've been teaching for 30 years plus. So, you know, yeah, I haven't had time to think about that. But if you're a newer faculty, right? I'm not saying that our colleagues are, I'm just saying for me, I did not always write the graders' directions or instructions. And so then it is essential that students seek feedback from the professor, because they're not a mind reader. And sometimes we think, you know, sometimes we make the mistakes that we try to teach students not to make, and we do our best, but there's so many ways of perceiving an assignment, and some students like very concrete and specific directions, and sometimes a professor might want you to use your critical thinking skills and not give you as many directions. And it doesn't mean that we are lacking direction, but we're trying to get you to use your creativity. And we want you to think about, to fill in the gaps. But then sometimes, you know, students can get to the point where they feel lost because we didn't give them directions, right? And not comparing at all, but when I went to school, my teachers will say, write an essay that is, you know, like 5 pages long, choose a subject and choose a style. And then there you go, right? And their syllabus was half a page or 1 page. We are at a time at the community college where our syllabus is, gosh, 10, 15 pages. And then when we make assignments, you know, like I find myself, you know, a page and a half of directions, telling them what size of font, what type of font, double space, and you don't always get that right and you're not going to get it for every professor. So asking questions early on, and I think the biggest cue is asking questions and early on, so that you're not, and that goes for the tutors as well, right? I know I like to hear about the things that don't make sense from my directions, because I have room to grow for sure. And that happens to us too. So yeah, ask questions. Yeah.
I think the earlier that you know what the expectations are, the better writing decisions you can make along the way. So
Yeah, you know, one thing I do, I put all my assignments are on Canvas, and I usually put them in about 3 weeks before the assignment is due. And then you know, oftentimes, and then I leave them on for a long time, right? We're not all the same, and we don't all have the exact same idea of what good timing is, right? And some of us are really strict with the deadlines. Some instructors are not as strict, right? But I do need to make sure that the students understand that deadlines are not suggestions, right? Some of us are hardcore. This is the deadline. I'm one of them. I don't. Yes, I mean, you can turn in late work, but it's gonna come in with a deduction, right? And when you go to work someday, eventually in the future, there are those expectations that you do need to meet the deadlines.
I really appreciate your answer, especially from like a writing studies point of view. it's exactly telling students like there's going to be different professors that have different expectations, and then you're going to get the ones like, hey, go do this, use that creativity, use that critical thinking. And I really resonate with what you said with deadlines. Like I think when you send them to the tutoring center, giving them that 3 weeks is like, hey, you have that time to create that process and really ask those questions. So I'm with you on that. So thank you.
I think too, it kind of ties back to what you said about procrastination. You got to start. You got to start, and sometimes that is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
So this next question is about skills. What foundational skills would you like students to walk in with? What do you wish you had known when you had started writing, reading, and research in your field?
I put these in the chat as well, the questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I'm gonna go backwards here. Something that I wish I had known when I started writing, reading, and researching in my field is that I majored in journalism, and the way you write for journalism is completely different. And that seems self-evident, right? When you're writing, even for social media, when you write is very concise, and everything is sort of on the surface, and is very condensed. And when you're doing research, a professor is not asking you for your opinion. A professor is asking you for what are the facts, right? And then students begin to get confused here and there because they get mixed messages from us sometimes, right? To give you an example, sometimes, and I had these professors, and I see it with my students, that I ask them to do an opinion piece. I ask them to read a section of a book and do an opinion piece, and they'll start asking for very concrete directions. What style? And so, well, you're not doing a research paper, right? So sure, you can use APA or MLA, and there are ways that you can follow it. But when you're writing a research piece, because now they're thinking that how many sources, and do they have to be in alphabetical order, and how long ago, etc. Remember, you're not looking at all the sources. You're looking at one concrete piece of work, right? And I want your opinion on this. And you can say that you didn't like it or that you didn't agree, and all of that is fine. But I'm asking you to give reasons why. And it's sort of a free writing, right? And so then, but we get stuck sometimes with but what style and how many pages, and it's like and so it's something that I learned when I was writing and doing research, that if an instructor asked me, the directions were very vague. The instructor wanted me to be creative, and they were looking for my opinion, and they were looking for my critical thinking. But then I had those hardcore instructors to where they were saying, so we're looking at this phenomenon. We want you to do a 5-page essay research on the subject, and then choose a style even then, right? But it had to be very concrete. So I became a better student when I learned what the instructor was looking for. And it's kind of unfair to the students, right? Because I'm basically telling you that they need to learn the style of the teacher and what is it that they want and what they're asking for, and everything should be equal, right, across the board. But the world doesn't work that way, and organizations don't work that way, and the classes, the subjects are not that way. And I tell my students, right, in communications, we're not a hard science. We're not chemistry. We're not physics. We're not algebra. We're not engineering. We're not, right? So then, generally speaking, in nonverbal communication, when you see this is what it means. And when people do this is how the experts have shown that over time, this is what it means. But it's not a hard science with a law where what is true here is the same in China and Brazil and Mexico and Italy. So it becomes a little bit complicated. So navigating what the class is about and what the instructor is looking for is something that I was able to figure out, not early on, but eventually. And as far as what foundational skills we would like students to walk with, I think is a the the ability to write and the ability to read is just so essential. And we can, research has shown over time, even with little kids, when early on in their elementary school, if they're not able to read, then they're not going to do well in math. And there's a correlation between the two, right? When they begin to read faster and more accurately, then the rest of the skills come through. And I know I've seen it with my own daughter, and I've seen it when I looked at research before that we wonder about how some kids are falling behind in math or chemistry or physics. Well, look at their reading skills and look at their listening skills. And when those skills are not there, typically, then the other ones are not. And when these ones come along, then these ones follow. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. So reading and writing is, and of course, listening, but we do teach listening in the majority of our courses.
Alrighty, so next question we have here is, how do you learn about or ask students to reflect on prior knowledge your students bring into your course? How do you help students identify and describe the knowledge they have learned in your course that might be relevant to other contexts, especially as they move through their academic pathways and into the workforce?
Yes, absolutely. So from the teaching point of view, I'm always making sure that whatever I talk to the students about, it has to be relatable to their daily life. Because if they can't see the relevance of it, then they're not going to retain that information, right? And I'll give you a couple of examples with, and this is so true with, if you ever read a communication skills book, or if you ever see lectures or syllabuses out there, they usually look at listening as the #1 skill for leadership, for efficiency, for effectiveness, to be successful in life. However, they're usually chapter 5 and 6 or 7. I say, wait, but this is the most important part, right? So I'm always presenting it on the second week of class. And it makes a difference in your life when you understand what kind of listener you are and what kind of speaker you're dealing with. Because for me, for example, I remember when I took a class in communications, I was not a very good student. And in fact, I was always forever labeled underprepared. And granted that it was because of language barriers and cultural barriers and socioeconomic barriers, still, when I learned about listening and what kind of listener you are and how the mind works, I became a better student overnight. And so I went from making C's, all the time and barely passing and barely getting through to where my scores just skyrocketed. And when you learn, so then when you learn to, as a speaker, as an instructor, when you learn to relate the information and present it in a way that it makes sense to students, then they're bound to retain the information. And here's another example, right? We tend to remember what we see, what we hear, what we see, and what we do. And if we don't have those three, then students are oftentimes not going to walk away remembering what they did. So I'm always trying to put an activity that connects the material to what that means and to put it into action. Because when they move on to what we call the real world, then when they're not going to be catered in any way, shape, or form, then they need to be able to make sense of the information and how to apply it in the work that they're doing. And listening, the number one skill from all the skills in communication skills to be able to be successful in life. And we don't teach that well. And we don't teach that to our children. We're always teaching them how to walk, how to eat, how to do one thing or another, but not necessarily how to listen or listen properly. So I'm always trying to present the information in relevant ways that it makes sense to them, and present scenarios that are also relevant to them. One of the things that we have to worry as faculty is to never, ever, ever intellectually bully the students. And I had that happen to me when I was a student, and therefore I never forgot. And I'm always thinking and forever being reminded when I'm talking to students that I had to be clear, concise, professional, but talking to at their level so that things can make sense and they can be memorable and so that they can remember them. Otherwise, what's the point?
I very much appreciate that. It's like when you're talking to an audience, we talk a lot about this in the writing studies classroom, is knowing your audience and being able to communicate. I always ask my students the question, would you communicate to kindergarteners the way you would to an engineer? They're like, no, not at all. And I really appreciate just even hearing like the idea of like active listening. We don't teach that, we assume that all students listen by note taking and that's it. And it's like, oh, they're learning, whatever. But it's really that each person has a different way of doing that. And, you have to have that opportunity to learn how you learn. So I really appreciate hearing that a lot.
Have you ever had a student that you're lecturing, but a certain student is doodling on a piece of paper, or drawing monsters or flowers or something? Like even our faculty, right? Like I know several faculty that they go into meetings and they're knitting,
Yeah.
and our students, they're writing or doing something else, and they're listening.
Yeah.
But the message is like, wait, you're not paying attention. What's happening? No, they're paying attention. So I talk to my students about how the brain works and why you need to occupy a certain region of your brain. And so if you ever talk to that student and that it seems to be distracted doing something else, and you ask them, what did I just say? That student is going to repeat exactly what you said with your exact same words. And it happens over and over again. But if we don't know that, it seems like they're being disrespectful and not paying attention. Mm-mm.
No, and I personally, appreciate that, having ADHD, being the doodler in the classroom, and
You're one of those. I knew it.
and like, the moment like the teacher's like, oh, what did I say? I'm like, you said da 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 da. And it's like, I heard you. And it's like, when you're exactly like if someone's knitting in our faculty meeting, they're still listening and you know that. And I think having that, I think of the word love, like having that love and grace for your students is probably the most powerful thing, because something you said earlier that really resonated was this idea that learning is a very vulnerable act. And it's, so it's like if we're bullying our students and like wanting them to be one way, like all ducks are in one row, we're not going to get that effective communication across. They're not going to become effective communicators. So I appreciate that example a lot.
Right, but don't tell the faculty that I was talking about them.
Let's hope they don't watch this.
Yeah.
Okay. See, our next question is from Lindsay.
Yes, this one is about AI. What is the role of AI in your classroom? How do you see students using AI effectively? And does your industry require that students learn to use AI tools?
Oh my goodness, I think AI is in everything we do these days, right? It's kind of taking over our lives, it's pervasive, and we have a choice to make. We can learn how to use it and use it to our advantage, or we can fight it and be against it and not making the best of it. But it's not going anywhere. It's not going away anytime soon. So it is something that it's been around for a long time, right? But we're now beginning to because it's been more pervasive in our lives in a way that is becoming an intrusion of sorts. So we need to get ahead of the curve and learn how to use it better. But there are corporations out there that are using it really, really well, and we need to learn how to use it properly. So, for example, I majored in journalism in French when I went to school, and I tried to stay up with the language. I do Duolingo in French, and so just to keep my mind fresh, I do. Duolingo has this session where you can do a fast round, and the app it's in any language, right? That Duolingo offers, and it's free. And so then uh, the way so when it's like playing a video game, but you're learning, right? And so then when they have a fast round where you play with the vocabulary and you have to match the words, and they give you a certain. So if you start doing poorly, then the app recognizes that, and then they start giving you more words, and you have to fill in the gap less and less each time. And if you're doing better, then you get more gaps, and then you have to think more, right? I was trying to do that in my classes at some point in time, because it's not only Duolingo. There are all kinds of Prezi, right? Doing presentations on Prezi. Now they have, so many of us use PowerPoint. I started using Prezi, and the challenge with Prezi is that they're not quite there yet, and they've been around for a long time, and they try and try and try, and somehow it's not taking over as much as PowerPoint, because PowerPoint is simple. But in any case, uh, social media, right? All the algorithms with how if you search something on the internet, if you're working on marketing or advertising, and those are areas of communications, right? When you're doing surveys for our classes, for the college, for employees. So yes, we're seeing the use of AI more and more and more and more. Grammarly, where they and it was there before, right? We're no longer using typewriters that where you have to use correction paper, and it's like, oh God, we better not talk about that. It's been 100 years almost. It feels like it. And so then we do need to help our students learn to be conscious of how they use AI, and not necessarily tell them to not use it, but how to use it to their advantage without I wouldn't call it cheating, but I would call it instead without trying to get ahead and not learning basic skills. Because it's like learning a new language, right? When you sometimes you can look things up, and you can have captions. You're trying to learn a new language, and you try to have all this help from outside, and that's okay, and that's useful. But sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and force yourself to start thinking in that language, right? And that goes with the writing. Don't look things up. Free write, free read, and don't just go to AI and try to have that do the work for you. That's the part that you have to learn the basics of how reading and writing and creative and critical thinking works, so that eventually you can just do whatever you want, but you have learned the rules and you know how to use them. And then, so anyway, yeah, it's pervasive, the way AI is taking over our lives. I don't look down upon. I'm trying to figure out ways how to implement it in the classroom. I'll tell you this real quick. When we do debates in public speaking, I have students. I do a survey as to who won the debate and who lost the debate, and so then on their phones they put in the results, and then we can see it on a graph on the screen. And that has nothing to do with their grades or how they're going to get constructive criticism, but they can see who's doing what as the debate is going. and we can see how they need to switch the pace and now argue for this or argue for that, or and students participate live in front of as the debate is going through.
That is a really cool just app. What is it called again? Is it like to help?
Yeah, so I have done it on what app did I use last? I was just doing a doodle poll,
Oh, nice.
and you know there's so many, you know, AI. There's so many new ways of doing it
Mm.
that it's not the doodle poll that we used to do 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah, it reminds me of the clickers, and I appreciate you talking about AI in general because I think a lot of the times we're focused on such on Chat GPT, and I appreciate just like, you have to have the foundational skills first and foremost, and these are tools for a reason, right? And before we use them, let's learn those stuff first. So yeah, I like
Yeah,
the.
I was
Yeah, go
yeah, I
ahead.
was thinking about, you know, we used to do clickers, right? It's like
Yeah,
I think they're holding my door. It's a they as a door stopper in my office. Yeah,
I used to have one. I had to buy one for my class. I remember
yeah.
that. Yeah. All right. So our last question is there anything that we did not cover that you would like students to know?
Yes, you know, I I'm always trying to tell students about when it comes to communication skills. And I was telling you earlier, they have to be able to show up with an open mind because we're not a hard science, right? We look at trends and we look at research and we look at statistics. And so that um, oftentimes students who are studying, say, nursing, they want the information to be very concise and very strict, and they don't necessarily like to deviate from the rules, right? And I understand and I get it, but I oftentimes talk to them about how our healthcare in the US is missing the care out of the health. And one of the reasons why communication skills are highly encouraged, if not required, is because we learn about the reasons why people behave the way that they do, right? Specifically with nonverbal communication, with perception, with conflict, right? With listening, and when you're dealing with patients, is um is something that our country can do better. And I'm not being critical, right? In terms of I'm just criticizing because I think that the healthcare system, when they have better communication skills, then they do better. The other thing that I'm often trying to remind students is that, and it's perhaps not related to the way we write or the way we speak, but about persistence, which life is about, right? I tell them to just stay in school and to not give up and to look for a support system, because when you have somebody that you know, somebody that you can go to, somebody that you can check in with, somebody, and it can be your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your friends. It can be a professor that you get along with. And so finding those resources, having somebody that can, us knowing that we have somebody that is there that we can check in with, it makes all the difference in the world. At a time when so many things are against us, and when there's so much despair, and when there's so many social, financial barriers, cultural, having someone that you can check in with, that can tell you you will do fine, keep on going, then that is so essential. I had that, and that's one of the reasons why I was able to stay in school.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you so much, Dr. Romas, for joining us today and letting us learn more about communications. I know the students are going to appreciate this area. Lindsay, is there anything else on your end?
No, one of the reasons I really enjoyed this interview is because it confirmed so many of the things that we've heard from other disciplines, but in a way that is specific to yours. So thank you.
Yeah, I feel the same way. All right, I'm going to stop recording here. Alrighty.